Hello again, it's DB93. Now this is the plant video I've been alluding to, but before we get into the experiment, I just wanted to talk about the thought process that went in behind designing it, as well as some of the key concepts behind that. First off, the aim of this experiment is to test whether photosynthesis is occurring. Now, photosynthesis states that it is a process of converting carbon dioxide into oxygen in order to metabolize certain products into sugars. So we know that it needs carbon dioxide, we know it needs light, and we know it produces oxygen. The easiest way to test this is by examining the gases produced. And we can do this simply by looking at the gases we start with and the gases we end with, rather than trying to get pure oxygen. In order to do that, we need a closed, controlled environment. I've gotten a large container and I put the plant in there. Now it's just there in the container at the moment, nothing special. This next bit is where it gets a little bit tricky, because what we need to do is we need to figure out how to introduce carbon dioxide into that environment, as well as remove any existing oxygen that may be in there. Now there was a relatively simple answer to that, and that is fire. So fire consumes oxygen to create carbon dioxide as part of its reaction. Now, how do we know it consumes oxygen? Well, you can't produce a flame in any atmospheric environment that doesn't have oxygen present. Not a traditional flame that we know in an atmosphere, that is. So a match, a lighter, anything like that will not work in, say, a carbon dioxide environment, a nitrogen environment. And I know the air is about 70% nitrogen as it is, but it's also 21% oxygen. And so that's how flames can actually persist in this environment. What I can do is I can put in a candle, and when I seal it, it'll consume all the oxygen that's present and convert it to carbon dioxide. How do we know when this is complete? The flame will run out of oxygen to consume, and the flame will die out. Now, just in case, I tested this method, and it worked fairly well, as you can see here. Okay, so we've got this tea light in this jar. So we'll add a lit splint to see if it stays light. It stays lit, sorry. So it stays lit the whole way down. So we'll add this lid. And see what happens. Okay, so the flame's just gone out. Now that suggests to us that something in the atmosphere has been consumed. If I add a split lit test, do we think it's going to stay lit or not? Let's have a look. Now I've got to be careful not to open the lid too much to let in air, which might contaminate the results. But let's have a look. It went out. I'll try that again. Okay, so it's lit again. And it goes out again. Now, when there was oxygen present, the candle was lit, but also the lit splint didn't extinguish. Whereas, once it consumed all the air, the lit splint was extinguished when it entered that atmosphere. That is because there was no more oxygen for it to consume. What do we think is going to happen? Well, once the candle burns out, and I leave this for, say, a week, maybe two, I'm going to introduce a lit splint into it. Now, if the lit splint goes out, that means negligible amounts of photosynthesis has occurred. Okay, it may not have occurred at all, maybe not enough, who knows. But if the flame persists and it doesn't extinguish, then that is a positive result for the production of oxygen via the consumption of carbon dioxide. So it means that photosynthesis has been occurring. Now there are a few factors in here that I need to control, that P&P obviously don't realize they need to control. First one, pH. Proteins and enzymes, which are very, very common in organic beings, such as animals and plants, require a very strict pH range to operate. You deviate outside that, you can denature the proteins or the enzymes, you lower functionality of the enzymes, everything just doesn't really work. Now, luckily I'm not adding anything which will drastically change the pH, so that should be fine. Okay, unlike P&P's example with the waterweed, I can't remember what it was called, the aquatic plant, where they added a huge excess of sodium carbonate, which would raise the pH, but they didn't add any acid to neutralize that out. And so not only were they not really producing any carbon dioxide, they were just raising the pH. The other one is temperature. So I need to make sure the temperature doesn't go too high or too low. If the temperature goes too high, you denature proteins and enzymes, and it's the same as when you cook meat. Now, when meat goes from the pink color, pinkish red, to a brown, when you cook it, that's because you're denaturing the proteins. So I need to make sure the temperature doesn't get too high. If I just put it in direct sunlight, it's going to be a lot like leaving a baby in a locked car in the sun. It's going to cook. Okay, because the inside of the environment has no way to disperse the heat, so it accumulates and by a greenhouse effect, and you end up with a much warmer environment than you do outside. It's still going to get sunlight, it's just going to get it indirectly. And I'm just going to leave it here. Okay, so I've got my setup here. I haven't put the lid on yet. That little wad of paper towels just to stop that floating underneath the leaves. Now when I put this lid on, the flame will slowly consume the oxygen until it extinguishes. Hopefully it won't burn through the lid, but we'll see. And it should be a sealed environment, and we'll check it in a couple of weeks to see if it has produced any oxygen. Okay, add some insulation, stop it from cooking. Okay, and that should help with that. The outside's not too hot. Fine, the lid's not too hot. It's good. There it goes. It's out. So that should be all the oxygen it consumed. Now, I did have to insulate the lid. Now, some of you may be saying it's not going to get any light there, but the fact that you can see it at all in that image means that it is in fact getting light, just not directly. It will be getting indirect sunlight so it doesn't heat up too much. It'll be inside my house so it doesn't cool down too much. pH should be fine. And this temperature control is something that P&P didn't realize they had to do. Or they did realise, and check this out.
To the top.
Absolutely no evidence of 43 degrees there.
43 degrees.
Not the 3 degrees, but 43 degrees.
Wow.
And this is the following morning.
Been a choir, that one.
Because what we did was that we had the strong light on for
3 hours.
For 3 hours. Then we stopped it, and we had overnight we had this light here, which can be seen to the left, just vaguely.
Which is a 20 watt bulb.
20 watt bulb. Okay, we had that shining on it all night, and we got nothing.
Nothing.
Absolutely zilch.
Nothing.
Zilch, nada, FA.
FA, yeah.
So, and one of the best ways to actually do it was what we did.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Yes.
because they're always showing you bubbles to prove the presence of oxygen.
Absolutely.
Anyone thinks photosynthesis is
Really happens.
really happens. You need your head testing.
Absolutely. Just
You
do
are
a
living
demonstration.
in a dreamland.
Do a demonstration.
We're living in a very, very, very shit society.
Messed up society.
Messed up. There's an awful lot of people in this society who are messed up.
Oh.
Because if you don't keep the temperature up, then you might actually produce oxygen. So I think perhaps they knew exactly what they were doing there. For example, I don't know of any aquatic plant that lives naturally in ponds that sit at around 45 degrees Celsius. I know of not one. Okay, so they're altering that environment, they're putting the plant under a hell of a lot of stress if they haven't killed it already by having it at that temperature. They're slowly cooking the plant. So we're going to control the temperature. Now, how do we know whether this has been successful? Well, at the end of the experiment, like I said, I'm going to introduce that lit splint. And if oxygen has been produced from the carbon dioxide, the flame will persist. If you disagree with this experiment, or you think anything is wrong, or any of my assumptions are not right, leave a comment or email me, and I'll get back to you. And if necessary, I'll alter the experiment as needed. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you look forward, like I do, to seeing the results, and we'll catch you later.